Today we're going to look at two Dasamsas of a father and their child. One of the important things in the Dasamsa is that the 10th house is the critical bhava. And of course, the 10th bhava, one of the things it represents is the father. So there's an element of greatness that you can get from your father, an element of fame and so on. So if you have a famous father, you sort of start with greatness. It's kind of the idea of a lineage of kings and dynasties and all that stuff. So sometimes when you see a strong 10th bhava in the Dasamsa, it can indicate, greatness that comes from the father. And on the other hand, when you see a bad 10th bhava in the Dasamsa, it can indicate a lack of greatness coming from the father. Okay? And in which case, the first bhava will be really important. And Saturn, of course, which are completely the independent success and great things a person's able to do. So looking at this first chart, right away we can see that Saturn, the most important bhava, is exalted. Great. Okay. That's going to give us some strength to this chart right away. Now in the Rashi chart, Saturn is conjunct Jupiter. So let's keep that in mind for when we look at the avastas of this Saturn. So Saturn's conjunct Jupiter. First, he's exalted, or Garvita, proud, by being in the first house, or being in Libra. Then he's conjunct Jupiter in the Rashi chart. Jupiter is going to delight Saturn. And Jupiter is going to do that quite well because he's in a natural friend sign. Then Saturn's influenced by the Sun to 7 points, but the Sun is sleeping, so not going to hurt Saturn. It's aspected by Mars to 41 points. Now Mars is going to starve Saturn somewhat, but not as much as Jupiter is helping. And then Saturn is, proud, or Garvita, to start with. Then Mercury helps Saturn to 17 points, and Venus helps Saturn with basically a full aspect, 100% strength of 60 points, and gives it more delight. So while there's a little bit of starvation due to Mars, this is a proud, delighted Saturn, which is a little frustration coming from Mars. All in all, it's a really robust Saturn. So that shows a person who'll do the hard work, will persevere, and do what it takes to do great things in life. Okay, the 10th bhava is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter's delighted by being in Scorpio, its natural friend sign. And Jupiter Mars is delighting him by ruling him, so this isn't going to really help. Then Jupiter's hurt by its enemy Mercury and hurt by its enemy Venus. Now, Mercury and Venus are going to thirst Jupiter because he's in a water sign. Now, remember, when a planet's not in a water sign aspected by his enemies, he gets starved and really gets destructive. When he's in a watery sign, the aspects just make him thirsty, make him feel a lack, but he can still produce, but only with a great feeling of lack. So Jupiter is not good. But what makes Jupiter really bad is in the Rashi chart, Jupiter's conjunct Saturn. And that makes Jupiter starved. And that's a really strong Saturn. So the 10th bhava is starved here. Now before I draw conclusions from that, let's also look at the Rashi chart. We know that the Sun and Venus are both karakas, or producers of the father. And Jamie tells us a way that we can find out which planet's more important, the Sun or Venus. The first rule to that, and I cover this in Graha Sutras, the first rule to that is that the planet that's with the most other planets, not including Rahu or Ketu, is more significant. Well, the Sun's with Mercury, Venus isn't alone. So the Sun becomes the prime indicator of the father for this person. The Sun's debilitated in the Rashi chart. It gets friend's moon influence, gets some friendly Jupiter influence, but then it's starved by Saturn, and then of course it's debilitated in enemy sign. So it's starved by its placement. Not a good Sun in the Rashi chart. In the Dasamsa chart, the Sun is debilitated again. And the sun, is debilitated again in the Rashi chart. It's aspected by, Venus. Oops, where is it at? Venus, and Saturn, which are starving it. The moon is helping, and Jupiter are helping. But it's not a good sun, okay, in either case, because it's in an enemy sign where it's debilitated. So Venus is taking a big chunk out of it to start with, and not enough for all those other planets to make up for, because of the fact that Saturn is starving the sun as well. And then the 10th Lord, Jupiter, we see is really mediocre. As a result, this person didn't get any fame, notoriety, any greatness, any foundation of greatness from their father. In fact, this person was raised by a single mother. Okay, single mother raised him, so he didn't have any fatherly influence. And again, it's that bad sun, and in the chart. And of course, we want to look at the Dasamsas for that too. But the point I want to make today is the karaka of the father, the sun, is in bad shape in the Dasamsa. So, and it's debilitated. So it's not going to be able to do anything for the father, giving an element of success to this person. He's not going to inherit any greatness. Then the 10th Lord is not the best planet in this chart. And so again, the person didn't receive any greatness from their father. Now Mars, the next important planet, Lord after the 10th Lord, is going to be the Lagna Lord Mars. Mars is in a friend sign, but that friend is sleeping, so can't really help him. But then Mars is aspected by the moon, his friend to 32, Jupiter's friend to 51, and two neutrals, Venus and Saturn. So it's a delighted good Mars. Okay, so there's a delighted good Mars, a good Lagna Lord. And Jupiter, the 10th Lord, is in the Lagna. That helps Jupiter as the 10th Lord, because when a Lord's on an angle, we try harder, we put more action into it. So this person makes more effort towards success with the Jupiter because it's in an angle. While Jupiter himself can't do a really good job of giving that success because he's just too mediocre, Mars, which rules Jupiter, is delighted. And so that's going to boost the 10th house status and doing great things due to Mars, which is the Lagna Lord, the Lord of his strong personality, his strong career focus, his strong sense of self. And that's how this person, so this is a completely self-made person. He got that great Saturn. And we know Saturn is the planet of isolation. To become Yogananda, how Yogananda actually said, he said, to become great at anything requires solitude, requires isolation. And that's why Saturn's so important in the Dasamsa. Because to do something great, we have to buckle down and do it ourselves. People who don't want to do that are usually going to be mediocre. Whatever it is, we have to push through on our own. So he's got that capacity with the Saturn. He's got that capacity with the Lagna Lord. And so this person, who grew up in a very, poor family, raised by a single mom who didn't have any kind of fantastic job, this kid was just so capable due to that Saturn, so hardworking, and with that Mars, that really from the age of 3, they started helping their mom around the house. And at 3, they were helping take care of their little sister, who had just been born, So this 3-year-old is like doing all this, amazing stuff, okay? So even at the youth, this person had signs of being really an amazing kid. At 16, they dropped out of high school. High school is just a waste of time to them. Again, Saturn likes to be isolated. And they got into athletic training and physical therapy and became really one of the most knowledgeable physical therapist trainer I've ever met. I remember when I was 16 and coaching cyclists who were going to college, I would meet their teachers, their professors at the university who were the sports medicine professors and the the exercise physiology professors, and I knew more than they did. I was like 16 or 17. Well, this guy, when I get together with him, I just kick back, and every 2 minutes I learn something new from this guy. I mean, this guy is just so knowledgeable about physical therapy, nutrition, exercise physiology, and it's all about sports performance. That's his angle, but it's all about nutrition and health, which is all what really performance is ultimately all about. But this person knows more about nutrition and the body than anyone I've ever come across. I mean, just phenomenally incredible. They're a great person. They've developed ideas and concepts and techniques and procedures that no one else has thought about. And this is a great person, who's done great things. And they have a good, solid Dasamsa. Okay, there's some great things in this Dasamsa. But they're very much a self-made person. And that 10th Lord let them still achieve greatness, even though it's a mediocre 10th Lord, because Mars, the ruler, is an important planet in the chart, and it's strong. And then they have that great Saturn. Now, in Jupiter Dasha, this person was pretty much going at it alone this whole time. They were working hard. Saturn was starving Jupiter, so it's not like the best thing. Okay, it's not the best planet for him. And there's a rule in astrology: when Jupiter and Saturn conjunct each other or aspect each other in the Rashi chart, Jupiter Dasha is mediocre and Saturn Dasha is great. Well, the reason is because Saturn's starving Jupiter, so Jupiter can't do that great. But then Jupiter is going to delight Saturn, so Saturn Dasha is going to rock. So this person, acquired knowledge, struggled through Jupiter Dasha, and developed an institute that they pulled in lots of money, but at the end of the year, every year they'd be broke. So they'd pull in $1 million and be broke at the end of the year and not really have spent a lot of money on themselves. All their money just went right back into their business. They didn't get a lot of validation. They didn't have a college education, so they weren't validated by other people in the business because they were the uneducated person, who didn't have any university credentials or anything like that, because Jupiter starved. That Jupiter was starved. He didn't have the great educational credentials. But Jupiter Dasha is still decent. Mars rules Jupiter, and it's in great shape, so his dispositor is good. One of the best periods was in Jupiter-Mars period. That's kind of a place where his institute kind of got some more recognition, and he took a big step up, as we'd expect, because Mars rules Jupiter. And whenever you're in the anterdasha of the planet that rules the dasha lord, things are going to go uphill for you. If the Dantardasha Lord's in good shape, which it is in this chart, so things went up during that time. But Saturn Dasha is the Dasha to look out for, right? Saturn is exalted. He's a great planet. He's delighted and proud. He's helped by Jupiter. So Saturn Dasha, things really started rocking for him, where he's got teachers, people he's trained around the world, doing his system of sports improvement, doing his systems of physical therapy. He's been invited to universities to give lectures, and they pay him a lot of money to come to see lectures, even though he's totally has no formal education at all. Medical doctors take his seminars to learn about anything from nutrition to physical therapy to whatever. So this person, is a great person who's given something unique to the world in the context of exercise, physiology, and sports performance. And we can see their Saturn Dasha is going to has many, many years of great stuff to give to them. Okay? Some other interesting things about this chart is that Mars, the Lagna Lord, Saturn, the Karaka, are both in the Padmaja, the zenith direction, and that's the really creative Dasamsa. This person is just so creative. They've created this whole new systems of sports improvement and physical therapy that just work so much better. And I've done readings for some of the athletes that he's worked with, and I've done readings for athletes who've gotten injured that work with him, and there's stories like that nothing was helping, and then they went to this guy's institute and they're back on track. Just totally universal, great new technologies and ideas and training technologies and things like that this person has developed, dietary principles that he's developed that actually work. And then Venus also is in the Padmaja Dasamsa. And if I remember correctly, okay, Jupiter's his Atmakarika. Okay, it wasn't Venus. I couldn't remember which one it was. So we see this great creativity happening in general because two of the important planets, Saturn and the Lagna Lord, are in this Padmaja, Brahma, creative, new things, concepts. And of course, when he started going with his whole physical therapy and sports performance, and of course, exercise performance is Mars. Training and discipline training is all Mars, right? And then, of course, Saturn has to do with the muscles and stuff. But so you see all that Padmaja creative qualities developing these great ideas and concepts, which has really helped them become successful. Now, one of the interesting things about this chart, too, is that the sun's debilitated. Mars, who rules the sun's exaltation, is on an angle in the Dasamsa. So Mars has more power to produce good results. It's causing a Nichabanga Raj Yoga. Then Venus, which rules the sun's debilitation, is on an angle from the moon. Then the Lord of sun's debilitation, Venus, and the Lord of sun's exaltation, Mars, are Rashi aspecting each other. So Mars and Venus are causing a Nichabanga Raj Yogas. Then Saturn, the planet that would be exalted in Libra, is exalted, and it's on an angle from the moon too. So it's also causing Nichabanga Raj Yoga by being on an angle from the moon. So all four possible Nichabanga Raj Yogas are made here for the sun, by Venus, by Mars, and by Saturn. And the sun rules Deha, the body. And that's why this person has been so successful with working with injured athletes and debilitated athletes. Athletes who have a debilitated body, a debilitated sun. Because he's just so good at fixing things, to making up for these weaknesses of body through Saturn, Mars, and Venus. Venus is healthy rest and nutrition. Mars is correct exercise. And of course Saturn is, working with the muscular of the body to help with things. And, I remember when I first met him, just based on my posture and the fact that I cracked my neck once when I was there because my neck was feeling tight, he told me things about my organic physiology. And he was totally right on. Like, he just said, oh, this organ of your system is weak because of the way you just cracked your neck. It's like, oh, wow. So this guy, his knowledge of the muscular and skeletal of the body and how it relates to health problems was just amazing. So, and we see that through Saturn, Mars, and Venus, all sort of canceling this debilitation of the weakness of the body. So it makes him just so good at fixing debilitated bodies, okay, which is what he's great at. All right, so this is a really interesting chart of a really amazingly capable, powerful person. Now we'll look at a couple other things, I guess, while we have it out. That's kind of the main interesting high points of the story. In the Dasamsa, the only bad planet, dignity-wise, is the Sun and Mercury. Okay? So the Bhavas aspected by the Sun and Mercury are going to suffer the most. The Sun doesn't aspect the first, and it barely aspects the 10th. The two of the important Bhavas, which is great. And Mercury is going to hurt too. Mercury doesn't touch the first. It doesn't aspect the 10th. Okay? Or it aspects the 10th, but not that strong. In the Rashi chart, Sun and Mercury conjunct the first bhava, though. So they do both hurt the first bhava. Okay? Now, as far as planets helping, let's see, there's no planets in neutral signs. So all the rest of the planets are going to help the first and 10th, all the other bhavas, and most importantly being the first and 10th bhavas. So the 10th bhava gets helped by the moon to 34, Mars to 35, Jupiter to 57, Saturn to 24. Way more than the measly aspects of the Sun and Mercury. So the 10th bhava itself is strong. Then the first bhava gets helped by the moon, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn, and it gets hurt by Sun and Mercury. But still, it's still a little bit ahead here, all these good influences. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. So it's a mediocre first house, but a strong 10th house. But again, it's always the Lord that has a bigger part to play in, because the Lord is what activates it. In fact, I'll explain that a little more. It's an important idea. You have to have something brought into your life. And it's the Lord that really brings something into your life. Okay, it's what initiates it and makes it happen. When you're under the dasha of the Lord of something, it happens, for good or bad, depending on the lajitari avashta of that Lord. Or the ruler of that Lord, the dasha of it, can bring that thing into its life too, in accordance with the lajitari avashta of that ruling planet. And it's going to be brought into your life basically into the strength of the Lord, because that's the initiating thing that makes it happen. It's the karaka, the producer of the bhava, the primary producer of the bhava. Then the bhava itself, while you have that thing, is going to have its ups and downs, indicated by the aspects to it and the conjunctions to it, by basically the influence of the planets that aren't its Lord. So if something starts really big because the Lord is really strong, when you have a bad planet aspecting it, it just can't hurt it as bad as if you start something that's really small and weak, and then a little aspect to the bhava from a bad planet can really reduce that bhava. So ultimately, it's the Lord's strength that really determines the greatness of that bhava, because it's that strength that it comes into your life, the consciousness behind making that thing happen. And then the other planets influencing that bhava just have to do with the maintenance of it. So when the sun dasha runs, everything in the Dasamsas is going to get stressed out, okay? Because the sun is going to be influencing things in the bhavas in the Dasamsa, and they're going to get stressed. But the bhavas that were really strong to start with, because their Lord's strong, will better weather that, okay? So if we were looking at this person's chart and we see, well, they're running Saturn dasha, Saturn's aspecting all the bhavas positively that it's influencing. It's going to be a positive influence. So great things are going to happen in the Dasamsa and Saturn dasha. Also because Saturn is exalted. Now, the only unfortunate thing is Saturn is in the 12th house. And that's going to increase their expenses. There's going to be huge expenses made for this person to get everything together. He'll be spending money on his facilities. He'll be spending all this money on his stuff, putting his money into his business and spending more. Okay? Which has been true. But Saturn will still give greatness, but it'll cost to give it. It'll be more expensive to create the space for that. And Saturn's influencing all the bhavas it represents. Okay? And so, it's going to be a great period of greatness, of doing great things and succeeding in great things. Now let's say they're running a dasha of the sun. At that point, the sun rules the 11th house, the house of income, and conferences. So in the sun dasha, conferences would draw less income, seminars would not be as robust. Okay? The good thing is, sun dasha is not coming. He'll be dead before the sun dasha kicks in, or on his deathbed. Okay? So there's no worries about that happening. But if it came earlier, it would reduce everything that the sun rules. It rules the first house, the Lagna, Lord, which is their ability to move forward in their career. So they wouldn't move forward in their career in the sun dasha. And then the sun, because it's debilitated, would also hurt all the bhavas it's aspecting. Now that's not going to be a concern for this person because they're never going to get the sun dasha. They're only going to get it in the context of another dasha. So say Sun, Saturn. In Saturn, Sun, we know greatness will be given powerfully because Saturn's strong. So in Saturn dasha, success will be given powerfully. But then the Sun dasha is going to come along, and Sun is an enemy of Saturn, but it can hardly starve it because it's sleeping, so it won't starve it. But it'll hurt the other bhavas. It'll hurt Saturn's bhavas. It'll hurt all the bhavas that Saturn's helping. So Saturn is helping out, let's say, the 10th bhava to 24 points, creating greatness to 24 points. In Saturn, Sun, well, now the Sun's going to reduce greatness by 16 points. Okay, and it's going to be a more stressful period to do a lot of great things in Sun, Saturn. But because Saturn's the Karaka, the producer of greatness in the Dasamsas, of persevering and continuing on, Sun, Saturn's not going to keep them from being unsuccessful. It's just going to create more stress, make it harder, make them have to work harder. Some things won't work out. But the Dasha Lord is still going to hold it together because it's a more important planet in the Dasamsas. Okay? But, you know, starting the end of this year through 2013, the person's going to have a little bit of a slide relevant to the success that they'd have over the years. And they're just finishing Saturn-Venus, and we know Saturn-Venus gives the full results of Saturn, which are great in this chart. And Saturn is ruled by Venus too. So, you know, success is there in Saturn-Venus, but now that success is going to taper off after Saturn, when Saturn-Sun hits. Okay, and there'll be some frustrations and disappointments. But because Saturn's good, things will still maintain themselves fine. So while Saturn's producing greatness, the Sun being debilitated is going to be really hard to maintain that greatness when Saturn-Sun commences. Okay, whereas in Saturn-Mercury, Saturn's creating greatness. Mercury's aspecting the 10th bhava to 20 points. I'm sorry, Mercury's an enemy's planet. Let's say Saturn, Venus. Venus is in good dignity. Venus is aspecting the 10th bhava. It's not. First bhava. Let's just skip ahead then. Saturn, Moon. Moon's in good dignity. It's in a friend sign. Moon's aspecting the 10th house to 34 points. So Saturn, which is boosting the whole chart and helping all the bhavas and creating greatness because it's Saturn, it'll be easier to maintain that greatness and maintain the great things that are being done via the 10th house when Saturn Moon runs, because the Moon is aspecting the 10th house and helping it. So the point I'm making is the planets conjuncting and aspecting a bhava that aren't its lord help maintain that planet or make it very hard to maintain that bhava. So they make it easy to maintain that bhava, that bhava, or they make it very hard to maintain it. If you're in a dasha that's creating that stuff and it's in a good lajitadya vashta, you're going to have success. But in the difficult antardashas of planets that are in bad dignity and hurting the houses, it'll be harder to maintain that success. On the other hand, if you're running a dasha that represents a key success-producing planet and it's in a bad lajitadya vashta, that bad dasha is going to cause you to lose success. Okay? And then, like the Sun dasha, for instance, in this person's chart, will cause them to lose success because it's in a bad lajitadya vashta, and because it rules the Lagna Lord, one of the key bhavas, lords in the Dasamsas. So the Sun dasha is going to, reduce their success. They're never going to get it, but let's say they were going to. It'll damage their success. It'll particularly do that under the influence of other planets that are damaging the success too. Like, say, Mercury, who's going to make it hard to maintain success because he's in an enemy sign. So when Mercury dasha runs, he's going to hurt things more. And especially so because he's under a dasha lord that's waiting to fail. So when a dasha comes that's hurting the bhavas, meaning a dasha of a badly dignified planet, that's not a ruler of a key bhava, then things are going to decay. Okay, but they're not going to have Sun dasha ever. Okay, so their Saturn dasha, sure, they'll have a little harder time in Saturn Sun, but they're still going to have success overall because Saturn is not going to be stopped by that sun. It'll just be slowed up and neutralized for a while, but it's not going to decimate them or anything like that. Okay? Oh yeah, one other thing. 5th house. The 5th lord, Saturn, is Saturn. It's exalted, Garvita, proud, and so this person will be proud of their kid. Their kid will do something great too. The 5th bhava is hurt by the sun, but it's helped by Mars. Then it's hurt by Mercury. So the 5th bhava is just so-so. Now the 5th bhava is the child themselves. But the 5th lord is really strong. So that gives the child some capacity for creating his own greatness. Okay? So there's a hint of the person having a great child too. So now we're going to look at the child's chart. Okay, first find out who's the father in the child's chart. Is it Venus or the Sun? Well, Venus and the Sun are both in the same Rashi. That means they both have 3 planets with them, not including Rahu. But Venus is an own sign while Sun's debilitated. So Venus becomes the karaka of the father in this person's chart. Okay? In the Dasamsas, Venus is in its own sign. It rules the 10th bhavakas, the cusp of the father. Venus is aspected by the moon. He's hurt by the moon. And Mars doesn't affect him, but he's starved by the moon a little bit. And in the Rashi chart, he's helped by Mercury, but Mercury's sleeping. He's hurt by the sun, and he's hurt by Saturn. So he's starved by all these other planets. Okay? So while he's in his own sign, he still gets a lot of starvation, and he's not so great. Okay? Now, this person, we already know, has a great father, which we can see by this, which we can see by this nice 10th lord and this Venus in good dignity. But there's some afflictions to it. There's the Sun, Saturn, agitated and starving Venus, and Mercury, who's unfortunately not able to help Venus because he's debilitated. So the only good thing Venus has about him is he's in its own house, but otherwise he's afflicted. Looking at the Lagna Lord is Saturn, and it is in a natural neutral sign. In the Dasamsas, in the Rashi, Saturn is agitated by the sun, but then supported by its friend Venus. So Saturn's 50-50. Okay, so he doesn't have the Saturn his father does. He doesn't have the great, the capacity for perseverance, the hard-working capacity for their father. They're not nearly the Saturnian capable person as their father is. And it's seen here because Saturn's just so-so. And that's also their Lagna Lord. So they don't have the self-made man potential of their father. Okay? Now, the 10th Lord has to do with their capacity for doing actions that create success. And we've seen that the 10th Lord's strong in its own dignity, in its own sign. But unfortunately, it's agitated by the sun and agitated by the sun and starred by Saturn. So it's really a 1/3 good, 2/3 bad. And what's interesting about this person has an element of fame and greatness put towards them due to their father. And they've worked with their father to some degree, but they haven't been able to totally embrace it as their path. And that's kind of keeping them from having this great success, sort of inheriting this full great success from their father. And why is that? Well, remember the rule in astrology, 4 planets in any house can hurt the house. Unless it's the 1st, 10th, or 9th. So if these 4 planets had been the 1st, 10th, or 9th Rashis, those 4 planets would have been much more capable of creating greatness. As it is, they're not. They're in the, they're in the 11th house, which is the house of your goals. And those 4 planets make it hard for this person to really see through what they really what they want their goals to be, what they hope to have in life. Their father was clear at it from a young age. From before 16, they knew what they wanted to do, and they left high school and started doing it. No jerking around after they got out of high school at 16. It was just going right down their path where they wanted to go. This person doesn't have that. They're not as motivated, as driven, as focused. Completely different personality than their father was. They do bask in the light of their father. They're very proud to be their father's son, but they don't have the desire to focus on something to the degree their father does. But we still see this great Venus. It's just all these other planets are sort of getting in the way of him embracing that greatness that he could have from his father. So he's really not doing it. I forgot to mention something in his father's chart. While the 5th Lord was solid and good, the Jupiter, the Karaka child, was not really good in the father's chart, if you'll remember, because it was starved by Saturn. And so his child, he's not going to have nearly the greatness of his father. He'll have some. It's not a terrible Dasamsa, but it's not nearly the quality of his father's. But the interesting thing I wanted to point out is the 10th Bhava Lord is great in this chart. Whereas in the father's chart, who didn't have any great father, the 10th Bhava Lord was weak. And here it's strong because this person has a greater father. But then there's afflictions to it due to Saturn and Venus. And of course, due to Saturn and the Sun. And that's this person really just not wanting to embrace the path of their father. Saturn's Sun gives a desire to sort of always want to prove yourself, sort of get out from under your own shadow. It's a difficult aspect just from a self-esteem point of view and knowing what you want and going about doing it the way you want. And so a Sun-Saturn conjunction in the Rashi will always hurt your Dasamsa because then Saturn will usually get agitated and, and so on. But I wanted to show this chart because the contrast of this person have a good 10th Lord compared to the father had a bad 10th Lord. And how this person doesn't, this person's father didn't have a great Jupiter, and so his child doesn't have the greatness that they had. Okay? They'll still be okay, but they'll be average. If this Venus wasn't bothered by the Sun and Saturn, though, then this would have been a child that just really embraced the greatness of their father. Because again, Venus is the 10th Lord, which is the father house possibly, but it also could be the house of other 10th house things. But Venus is the Karaka of the father in this person's chart. So it's definitively the father. And we also can see the greatest thing in this person's life ultimately will be what they get from the father. But they won't take that to the level possible because the Saturn-Sun conjunction on top of Venus, which is sort of ruining that level of greatness. And we see that by Jupiter being starved in the father's chart. So we see this sort of connection and relationship. Okay? So this person is not going to be the incredible individual the father was. They'll have a mediocre level of greatness, with the father being one of the great things in their life. And it's just unfortunate anytime you get a 4-planet conjunction that's not in the 1st, 10th, or 9th, it makes it harder to have the success that you could have otherwise, okay, as it is in this person's chart. Okay. So, this person just won't be the greatest one of, he is involved in his father's work, but he's not as avid into it. He's not going to be the best at it. If you remember in the father's chart, Venus was a good planet. Okay, Venus had a great aspect from its friend Mars, or its friend Saturn. It was getting helped by its friend Mercury. It was a good Venus. Venus rules students. So his greatest person in his world, in the father's world, will not be his son. His son won't be his greatest practitioner. it'll be one of his other students, because Venus in his Dasamsa was stronger than Jupiter. And Venus are your students. Jupiter is your child. So if a person's Venus is stronger in the Dasamsa compared to their Jupiter, then their greatest student or protege is going to be a student and not their own child. But if Jupiter indeed is the stronger, then a person's greatest protege is going to be their child and not some other person. Okay? So a lot of interesting things you can see with the Dasamsa where a person's greatness will come and go. And this is a really sort of neat example to show all that. Okay, that should answer it then. Let's see if there's anything else I want to mention here. Let's see. Well, just in general, just looking at these lords as a flash, you can see this person doesn't have any of the Brahma or Padmaja Dasamsas. They don't have that great creative ability that their father had. Okay? They have more Maruta and Northwest, which is the moon. And the moon, of course, is being more receptive to go with the changes in the flows. And that's more how this person is geared, going with the flows and the changes of the environment. So he can kind of flow along with his father's work and institute, but doesn't have the creativity to create something that's brand new. Not that he needs to. His father's done all that, and really there's not many people that could improve upon what this person's father has done. Okay. So quite different compared to all that creative Dasamsa energy that the father had. Okay. All right. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy that example.